If you're thinking about, okay, I prefer getting all my gains through appreciation, then potentially like a gross rent multiplier might be a better metric to look at. And what that is you're taking the annual rent and you're multiplying by some number that the area supports, as a multiple on the rent. Chicago, a lot of places like a 12 times multiple. So if you're getting $100,000 a year in rent, then you multiply by 12, and then that's what the building should be worth.
Laurence, thank you for joining me for our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host, Matt Camp, head of partnerships for DealMachine. On these, we really like to shine a industry spotlight on experts like yourself and to really educate our audience and to really share your inspiring stories and really help you share how you see the world evolving. So, our audience is really excited to welcome on Laurence Jankelow, the co-founder of Avail. I know you guys recently were acquired by Realtor.com, so you're part of that network now. You're an all-in-one property management solution for DIY landlords. So I think that'll be really relevant for our audience today. And then prior to launching Avail, I know you also spent 7 years in data analytics as a consultant for Protiviti in Chicago and then at Goldman Sachs. So have an interesting background there. And also outside of that, you were a long-term real estate investor with a passion for multi-unit properties in Chicago. So you have a couple of different things here that I think will be really exciting for our audience to learn about.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Really happy to be on and talking about real estate and life in general.
Yeah. Again, Laurence, welcome on. I really appreciate it. And, to kind of begin with, maybe I would love to hear your real estate investing journey specifically and talking through that, and can kind of evolve that into hearing more about Avail and how your startup was born out of that.
Yeah, definitely. I love real estate investing. We got 11 units now, but started that's still humble, I guess, but I started more humbly than that. Started with just a single 3-flat here in Chicago. Actually bought it from a friend who I worked with at Goldman, and he was moving out of state. He had bought it kind of like a house hack. So he lived in one of the units, rented out 2 other units. And when he was moving, he's like, hey, I need to sell this. And the market then wasn't as good as it is now. So he was having a hard time. And I'm like, hey, I'm interested in jumping into being a landlord and property investor. And we kind of did an off the books, or I guess off market deal. Mm-hmm. That's my first one. I still have that building. It's probably been my best one so far.
Nice.
Most performing.
Yeah. Awesome. And I mean, going back, obviously, it's great that you were networking, had a friend in that world, but is there anything kind of through this real estate investing journey specifically that you would have done differently, that you go back and say like, hey, I might have taken this strategy or this strategy?
Yeah, I probably would have done it a lot sooner. If I knew that it's not that big of a pain. You hear all the stories like, I don't want to answer calls at 3 in the morning or fix toilets or whatever it is, but those just aren't really realities. I don't get 3 a.m. calls because my tenants are asleep at 3 a.m. Right. So I don't. So I think knowing now that some of my fears were maybe outsized versus reality, I would have done it a lot sooner. And it just sets you up on the right path, thinking about financial independence, thinking about how you build your financial freedom, how you view money, taxes, all of those things change when you get that first property, and sets you off on a much better path. So the advice I would have given myself is sooner. And then with that particular property, I probably would have looked at more of the deferred maintenance issues that were there. That first year probably had to spend a good $20,000-$30,000 just to undamage some of the wear and tear that should have been fixed over its lifespan that wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the fear of not getting in sooner or not just going for it, is there anything? I mean, we definitely have plenty of people listening to this that are looking at that first investment, are getting ready, or hopefully getting ready to take action on that. Is there any advice you give for them to help them take that action? And they're probably consuming a lot of content, trying to educate themselves, but might be experiencing that fear.
Yeah. Well, the fear, that's a mindset. You just say, I'm not going to be afraid. As problems come up, I'll handle them. I think some of the obstacles that people face that you could probably get around, first one is the financing of it, right? How are you going to buy this property? And if it's your first property, you might be like, oh, I got to put 20 or 25% down. And that might be a hard sum of money for people to come up with. But if it's a rental I wouldn't advise it for a single family home to do this, but for a rental property, I really like what, some of the government programs you can do. So like you can get the FHA loan on your first property. And if you're going to live in the building, you qualify for those loans. You can do as little as 3% down. And because it's income generating, you're not really taking on all of this bad debt. It's really good debt. And so that'd be the first thing I'd think about, is just doing it as a house hack, where you live in one of the units, rent out another one or another two. And that way you can start earlier and younger, and reap the benefits of it longer. So that's probably what I advise as a big thing there. And then thinking about the numbers. So when you're doing your first one, it's hard to think about it as a business until it's been started. But if you can think about it as a business before you get started, that's going to change a lot for you. So think about the numbers in terms of revenue and expenses, what kind of return on your investment you might get. There's some hard and fast numbers people use in real estate, like the cash on cash or a cap rate or a gross rent multiplier. Those are really good numbers to think about as you're buying it, and people can research what those mean. But those are all little numbers as tools to help you know, okay, am I overpaying or underpaying? And single family homes, people overpay all the time because it's an emotional investment, and it's okay in that world. But for a rental property, you can't and shouldn't overpay. So those numbers start to become pretty important to look at.
Yeah, I was curious. I mean, then your background obviously is in data and very, numbers driven. Can you speak to that, on how that's helped you with your real estate journey? And then even, I know you touched on a little bit there of some of the metrics you should pay attention to, but I think that's definitely something that our audience would love to hear about, is how you go through that analysis of a property.
Sure. Well, I started off in finance, and then maybe on accident went down the path of data analytics. So I was a finance major and started in like financial and business and risk consulting. And then I had like a lull between clients. And the company I was at, they match you with clients, and then you go out there for months on end. But I had like a 3-week lull, and they offered this training on data analytics, so I took it. And out of that training, I started being picked up for all of these data analytics projects. And it ended up being 4.5 years of just straight data analytics projects, from client to client to client to client. And that basically changed how the nature of the work I was doing. Before it was looking at some sort of financial thing, and then it changed into, okay, what kind of data can I get to see how a business is performing and what kind of improvements they can do? And that eventually led me to join Goldman, and worked with them, supported their hedge funds, alternative investments, and private equity groups, basically using data analytics to help them understand what their business is doing, and produce them kind of more real-time reporting to make kind of decisions and changes. So I've always had because of that path, always thought about numbers. Wish we all thought about numbers, because there's facts in numbers, right? And especially in today's world, where there's so much opinion-based fact, I'll call it, that if you just look at the data, the world could be a lot easier. And so I apply that to a lot of what I do on real estate. Even with Avail, when we first started it, we were heavy into understanding, okay, how does the data change who our customers should be, what kind of features do we give. We let the data make all of those decisions for us, and in the long run, that pays off at both the startup, but then also your real estate investments.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of that data, I know I kind of bulked this together with my last question, but do you have any other tips? I know you talked about cash on cash and things. Do you have any other metrics that you personally really look at, that you say, hey, for newbies, make sure to keep an eye out for XYZ, or would love to hear kind of your thought process on analyzing an investment opportunity?
Yeah, well, the numbers depend. Which metric you're using depends on your goal a little bit. So for me with real estate, I want the passive income. I want a monthly income coming in. So I look at cash on cash as my number one metric. If I invest this money, how much money will I then bring in every month to support my lifestyle or my other goals? That's a pretty important one if my goal is some dollar amount of passive income a month. And I'll generally also try to steer towards something north of 7% cash on cash. That's me in this environment currently. That's just my minimum threshold. If you're thinking about, okay, I prefer getting all my gains through appreciation, then potentially like a gross rent multiplier might be a better metric to look at. And what that is you're taking the annual rent and you're multiplying by some number that the area supports, as a multiple on the rent. Chicago, a lot of places like a 12 times multiple. So if you're getting 100,000 a year in rent, then you multiply by 12, and then that's what the building should be worth. And so I use that a lot if my goal was appreciation, because then I'll start thinking about what are the things I can do in the building to increase rent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Knowing that while every dollar in rent I increase adds $144 of value to the property, right? And so then you start looking at, okay, what's going to cost me $10,000 to add a bathroom or fix a bathroom, but it's going to add $1,000 a year in rent. Well, that's $12,000, right, in total value. So, getting 12,000, paid 10, I've just made a 20% return. So I start to use gross rent multiplier in that sense. But because for me, my goal, it's all goal based. My goal is that cash return monthly. So I don't generally look at gross rent multiplier that much anymore. But those are the two big numbers. I would say a lot of people look at cap rate. They're all so interrelated. But I think it all depends on your goal. So you'd have to have like a one-on-one conversation with someone as to which one they should look at.
Yeah, I think you are right. That's a great way to look at the world of just, simplifying it in terms of, hey, is it, what's the return on my dollar here? And how do I figure out, you can make it a really easy decision at that point.
Yeah, there's still a lot of assumptions in there, right? Like with
Right.
the bathroom example, I don't know how much additional rent that's going to get. I'm guessing, looking at comps in the area for like places that have a three bathroom and I have a 2-bathroom, like how much more rent will it get? So there's definitely assumptions, and you can be wrong, but you maximize your chance. You maximize your chance of being right and getting a good return by just thinking this way, even if your assumptions are faulty.
Yep. Do you, speaking of ways, I know you talked about, hey, investing in the property to be able to increase rent, speaking to all the landlords out there, are there any low-hanging fruit or areas that you recommend saying, hey, here are the places to best invest to be able to, get a better cash flow number there?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, because you're thinking about it as a business, you want to increase rent and decrease expenses.
Right.
And if your goal was that monthly cash, then either direction works, right? Increasing revenue, decreasing expenses gets you more income. If your goal was appreciation, then you really only want to focus on increasing revenue. But some of the low-hanging fruit, washer dryers in unit are awesome. Like that's probably in the top 3 most requested items that people are looking for, and filters that they're using when they're looking for a place. So if you don't have an in-unit washer dryer, that's probably a really a cheap way to add a lot of rent and get a lot of interest. There's things like just making it look a little more modern will also help, and making it have a more fresh feel. So going with more neutral colors. Painting is really cheap, really easy. If there's a lot of kind of brown woods, people really like white trim today. So you can do those things very affordably and raise the rent. It's good photos of the property. So if you're listing it for rent, if you have good photos, you can add 5% to your rent just by having good photos, because people need to see really good photos to even want to come and see the property. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could do there's hundreds of these things. We should let's co-write a blog on this and get it out to your audience. But I think I could go all day with little things people could do to inch up revenue.
That'd be great. Yeah, hopefully we can link to that here. But yeah, I love hearing those tips. I appreciate you getting granular with that, because I know our audience loves the very actionable takeaways like that. But one thing I was curious about, I know you went through really exciting startup journey, and you founded Avail, scratching your own itch. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that journey, why you started Avail, and then even more about Avail, so our audience is aware of that. We'll link to that as well. I know we'll have an actual special offer for anyone listening to this, so that way, if they do actually want to use Avail as a tool with for DIY landlords, then we'll make sure you guys have a special benefit for doing that. But would love to hear more about your journey and why you started the company.
Sure. Yeah. I love talking about it, obviously. I'll give the 5-10 second what is Avail, and then we can kind of gloss over that and get to kind of the journey itself, because I think the journey is more interesting to the audience and myself. But Avail is essentially a suite of tools for do-it-yourself landlords. You go online, you have a certain number of needs, and the tools are there to try to fix those. So from listing syndication, if you're trying to find tenants, we create the listing with us and we push it out to pretty much everywhere in the world that tenants are looking. Then we hook into TransUnion to get screening reports. We allow your renters to pay their rent online, submit maintenance requests online. We give access to state and city specific lease agreements, so you don't have to use that lawyer, kind of all of the operational tasks. So that's what we provide. It's a free service. There are some premium upgrades you can do, but it's essentially a free service. So there's no reason not to try. That being said, the journey itself, I started off as a landlord working at Goldman. And what I was struggling with was finding the time of the day at an investment bank to then also do a few of the things that you are required to do when managing a property. So just showing up for showings, or writing a welcome email to my renters. You don't think of those things as time consuming, but they take a little bit of time. And you quickly realize, hey, passive income through real estate's not as passive as it can or should be. And that professionals are using all of these tools to automate that stuff. So like I should have automated welcome emails to my tenants that explain when the garbage collector is coming and those kinds of things, but I don't. And to pay for something like that's going to be super expensive. So Ryan and I got together. Ryan's my co-founder of Avail with me. We got together. He was sharing the same problems, and we're like, hey, we got to do something about this. So we ended up quitting our jobs. He was also at an investment bank, and started building these tools that ultimately were designed to help us. So kind of starting off with that listing syndication, it's really kind of a pain to take a listing and post it on Craigslist and Zillow and Hotpads, and then have all these leads go to these disparate systems, and you try to manage it and you forget what's what. So we set out, we built all those tools. The problem was we're in the Midwest, we're in Chicago. And in 2012, when we started, the Midwest is kind of a desert for what I'd call engineering talent as well as capital. And so we couldn't raise money to hire an engineer of significant quality, but we also couldn't find those engineers even if we had money. And engineers don't want to work for equity in Chicago, or at least in 2012. They just didn't value it. And so we had to make that tough choice. We ended up rolling up our sleeves and teaching ourselves to code. We spent the first 2 years just doing that. I think I wrote the first 500, 600,000 lines of code, having never touched code before. And I think that brings a lot, right? Because now I understand it so well and know that I can talk with our product and engineering team all day. A lot of the code I wrote is still there, so I don't know if that's good news or bad news. But it did really enable us to understand kind of the full cycle of software development, and what it takes, and appreciate other software too. Not just the Avail or Realtor.com software. Now I have a respect for all software because it's really difficult to build. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and then fast forward, landlords loved what we were doing. Last year, Realtor.com saw what we're doing, loved the opportunity, and then pursued us and made a great offer. And strategically, I think for both of us, it makes a lot of sense. They're everything real estate, and we're a huge deal in rentals. So it just made sense to let's combine forces and change how rentals are done.
Yeah. I mean, do you think going through, you guys went through quite a grind. I can imagine throughout that entire process, going through that, were there any lessons you learned from that startup journey that you think really applied well to your real estate investing, and that, anyone that's trying to start their own, real estate business listening to this could take away and run with?
Yeah, I think prioritizing your time is important for both, and then understanding when you should work on something and when someone else should work on something. Mm-hmm. And then those two things are entirely related. You only have so many hours in the day, and there's so much time for you to create value, either for yourself or for someone else. And every option you choose to do one thing means you can't do the other. And so life ends up becoming a game of maximizing value for somebody. It's yourself or someone else. And I think that's true of both the startup and real estate investing. With the startup, it was really hard for me to let go of the code base and give it to someone else, a professional who knew what they were doing once I had been in it for so long. But you have to do that if you're going to continue to grow the business and build it in other areas. And I think the same thing is true for real estate. I think it's really good to start as a do-it-yourself landlord, but you have to know your limits and have to know you don't want to spend hours on something that someone could probably do in 10 minutes. So I tend to think a lot of like the maintenance things that, I was maybe bullheaded on doing myself and would spend like a half day trying to figure it out. not valuing my time, right? And knowing that, hey, I could just hire somebody, it could be $100 and they'd fix it within 30 minutes. I think that's important because I could have been spending that time thinking about how I'm going to get more rent, or thinking about how to lower some of the other costs, or how to get the next investment property and go on showings for more properties. It just becomes this trade-off of time and value that I think applies to both, that everybody should just be aware of.
For sure. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I know a lot of people listening to this, they may even have a full-time gig right now, and this could be, a side project. They're looking to change careers or looking to get into to real estate, build up their portfolio that way, or they're a brand new landlord and are trying to figure out that time trade-off. So I appreciate you kind of walking people through that. And then, I really, really enjoyed the conversation today. Do you have any other kind of, parting words of wisdom here for new investors and for new landlords on, how they can be best spending their time?
Yeah, well, one thing I think that would be super useful, do-it-yourself landlords don't really have a good central community amongst themselves, especially because you said they all have their own jobs, they're all doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like when you go meet someone somewhere that they identify as being a landlord. They're first something else, and then, oh yeah, on the side I do some property management, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
never, oh yeah, I'm a landlord. It's just, you don't identify that way. So it makes it hard for us to build a community, learn from each other, share wisdom. That's where these kinds of podcasts are super important. So what I would advise everybody to do, if they're a new landlord or aspiring landlord, and especially a longtime landlord, is to start thinking about, how do you develop that community, and how do you start to teach younger landlords how to be better landlords? Especially now, I think we could all be more responsible and become better landlords. I think there's a way to treat renters well and make money. And professionals have learned that over the years. And I think bringing together that some kind of community is going to be pivotal here. And we work hard on trying to do that, both at Avail and then at large at Realtor. But it's really going to be kind of an effort of all of us. So anybody who's listening who's a landlord, start thinking about what other landlords you can talk to and share the positive stuff you can do to influence the marketplace.
I love that. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And you guys do a great job of trying to further that mission. So again, we'll make sure to link out, the various things that we reference here, so that way people can get more involved with you guys. Laurence, is there anything, any other places that people can be getting in touch with you or following what all you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you come straight to our website, avail.co. It's a .co, startup life. Couldn't afford the .com. But we have a huge amount of educational material on the website that teaches you how to be a landlord, how to become one, how to do it well, how to be responsible. That's a great place to learn, but then I'm also on there myself as well. We have a community section where people can kind of go and answer questions and get answers. I'll often contribute there as well. And if anybody wants to reach out to me personally to have a conversation, they can reach me at Laurence@avail.co. I love striking up conversations with any landlord out there, right? We all got to work on it together. So ping me via email and let's chat.
Yeah, thank you for being available, and this was very inspiring. Excited to share this with the community. So thanks again for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yeah, appreciate it, Laurence. And to everyone watching, this is Matt Camp, and happy deal finding.